Very good. Well, welcome everybody to the Power Lunch. Today we're going to be talking about Veeam. Originally, we had planned to have Veeam here in person with us, but luckily we get even better than Veeam. We get John Anderson to talk to us about it. Veeam wasn't able to attend, but we have John to talk to us about it. The one, the only John Anderson, who we call OB John Kenobi. The man, the myth, the legend. So, we have some informative slides. We'll talk about a little bit about Veeam itself. We'll also talk about a little bit of version 11 stuff because there's some cool things in there. And then,
version 11 came out maybe a few months back. It's still pretty new. I haven't made the deep dive into 11 yet, and there's some licensing restrictions that we'll talk about in the meeting here. But
they always have to have some double secret stuff.
Right.
Licensing restrictions. We can't.
Yeah, they can't just give it all away.
Can't just give it all away. We have to leave something to the mystery.
Right.
So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into it. I'll turn it over to you, John. And then I guess the one thing I would say is let's have this be conversational. If you have questions or anything that you need, feel free and just ask questions away. We'll be glad to answer them, and we'll just go from there. So go ahead, John, take it away.
I'm not much of a public speaker, but we'll do our best here.
You make up for it with good looks.
Well, there's that, of course. Yes. Okay. And age and wisdom and all that.
And age and wisdom.
Right. So just a little, I'm basically going to do an overview of what Veeam does and how it does it. And then we can, if you got some questions along the way, just shout them out and we'll take care of it. So, Veeam with version 11, they've added some things to what they can do with Veeam. Traditionally, Veeam's been known for backing up virtual machines. VMware, Hyper-V. They've now added Nutanix, AHV, that's new to that. AWS infrastructure, Azure is relatively new. That came on board with version 10. Google Cloud and IBM Cloud are all new as well. They did do some physical computers and prior to this, but it was a separate product. It wasn't really integrated into the backup and replication console. I've been using it for a few years at home and just backing up to a NAS, my wife's machine and the kids' machines and all that stuff. I'm backing them all up and everything's been great. And I've restored a couple and it's been just flawless. And the beauty of it is for home use, if you're just doing local backups, it's free. So, nothing like a free backup solution that's enterprise class.
That's kind of one of those things that's a hidden gem in there is a lot of times people don't know or don't think about the fact that they can use Veeam on their local, on a physical device, and then the other one is for personal, that it's a free tool that is a great tool. So that's kind of a little hidden gem deal in there.
And the other thing with the physical machines, one of the cool things is it does bare metal. You can do a bare metal restore from one physical machine to a different, and it works. I've done it. It works, and it's quick. It's painless. The backups, the first one is a full. Everything after that's incrementals, and you can choose based on your comfort level, how many and drive size, what do you want for retention? I keep 30 days, it's plenty. My wife is good at deleting files and then saying, hey, go find that for me. And
that never happens.
That never happens. Right. And now I got a 1.5-year-old grandson that likes to poke buttons on the computer. So, we've had to use it a time or two for that too. But now they're doing Windows. They've always done Linux because I think Veeam is Linux based, just at its core. But they've done Windows and Linux. They've added Macs, Unix, and NAS. That's all new. So you can back up your NAS to something else, and restore individual files, folders, the whole deal, the whole thing if you want to. But another new piece to Veeam is the whole software as a service piece, Office 365. Initially, they only did email. Now they're doing a little more. They're doing SharePoint data, OneDrive data, and Teams data. I guess the Teams data was the piece that was the most difficult for them. We talked about it. I talked to their support guys about it a while back, maybe a year ago, and they're like, yeah, well, maybe. But they've managed it in version 11. So we're doing that for a couple of our clients already. And the backup is a separate program. It's not integrated into the whole software as a service. Office 365 piece is not integrated into backup and replication. It's its own separate program. It programs up a lot differently. The retention is based on the storage. You set the storage up for retention policy, not the actual backup. And basically you just choose which users you want to back up to that storage, and you can have I've got a couple where I've got them set up for a year. I've got some users set up for forever, and it just keeps stacking that data up. And you can go back in time and say, hey, what was there on November 25th of last year? And you can see whether or not, gee, this person, they quit and they cleaned out their email box. Well, fine, let's just go back to a week or two and grab all that data and reinstate it. We can do that with Veeam. It's really slick.
Cool.
So, yeah. So I'm just going to go over some of the types of backups that Veeam does. You can do an image level, the whole VM, for example, whole NAS device, volume level partition, and you can restore a disk or a partition. Nothing real fancy about that. File level restores, all that kind of stuff. It's all really well-known stuff. The key piece is versioning, and that's always the case with backups, because the most current backup isn't necessarily what you need, especially if you get hit with some kind of ransomware, encryption. You got to dig a little deeper and go back a little bit for a lot of stuff. But the beauty of that is you can find, gee, it started on 3 days ago. You can grab the majority of your data from then. And as things get encrypted, you can go back a little further and find your files that you need that haven't yet been encrypted, and unencrypt them and restore them. So it works really well. We've done a few.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
On those backups, I like the versioning. Can they be set up so they're read-only, so they can't be encrypted?
Yes, they can. That's part of the new piece in version 11.
Okay.
Immutable restore points is now a thing in
Oh
Veeam.
yeah.
So they had to. I mean, you can't do it without. And part of that is part of the big protection picture is having local backups and cloud backups where it's separated. You're kind of air gapped then.
Right.
So
I have a customer who's kind of looking at it from a security perspective as well, and what they're doing is, so they're doing the local backup, and then they're creating a separate VLAN. They're VLANing it off so it's segregated, so it's only a backup network, segregated, and only opening the firewall. So it's firewalled off, only opening it up for that known IP for the backup box or the local backup.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're using a tool like AppGuard, putting AppGuard in the backup environment so that if something were to propagate into the backup environment, AppGuard will stop it. But if you're familiar with AppGuard, one of the things that AppGuard has the capability of doing is like stopping everything in a production space. It can bring them to their knees from a production perspective. But they're actually, like I said, moving that over into the backup network and having it there. So if something were to happen, AppGuard will stop it, and it won't stop all of production. kind of an interesting take on it. I thought that was a creative use of the various technologies, but Veeam being at the core of that as well.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I'm gonna move on here. It's more of the backup stuff, the software as a service stuff. We can restore individual files or individual emails, whole mailboxes. We had a customer that was looking for particular words in emails. We were able to search that, parse that stuff out. They had like, I don't remember how much data, 10,000 emails, over 10,000 emails that this thing was able to pick up out of all their environment that had this particular word or phrase in it that they were looking for. And it took a while to do the search. The searches take a lot of time, hours for the searches in Office 365 backup stuff. But it's a new product for them, and I'm sure they continue to tweak it.
I think
But
even still today, one of the things I run into is that there's an assumption that Office 365 is just backed up, that your email is just backed up, and when the realization comes that it isn't, understanding the Veeam tool, and that it's relatively inexpensive to do that Office 365 backup makes it almost a no-brainer. I won't say a no-brainer, but almost a no-brainer to have that type of thing, either on your enterprise mailboxes, or maybe there's key ones that you want to make sure that you're as the guy who's done a few data center moves, etc. That was bee's knees.
That really, it did
Yeah.
work out exceptionally well.
Because those can be really painful.
Well, and the thought of moving all that hardware over there just to get everything migrated, get it on the new, get it in the new system and then migrate it over and then take it out. This just eliminated all that extra work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Ken.
Ken.
How's it deal with the new hardware in the sense of drivers and things like that? Does it-
It's well, for virtual machines, it doesn't,
It's
it's,
easy.
it's agnostic. It doesn't care.
Mhm.
Because that's all handled by the virtual operating system layer. But physical machines, I don't know how it does it, but it does it. I've done it on 2 Windows 10 laptops, switching manufacturers and CPUs and amount of
Really?
RAM, and it just works, man. It's amazing.
It's kind of impressive.
Windows is pretty good. Windows 10 is pretty good about grabbing the correct drivers now. They've, for the most part, they've got that down. There's a few things out there that we struggle with yet, but Windows 10 does a lot of that heavy lifting, but Veeam really sets it up well. You can add drivers if you know ahead of time you're going to be moving.
Okay.
You can add those drivers into the backup. And so that when you do the restore, it just reinstalls those drivers, just like you did in the old days, when you were moving stuff around and setting up operating systems and you had to go in ahead of time and put the RAID drivers in and do all that stuff as part of the
back in the day, though, sometimes that would get a little hinky and wouldn't want to boot.
right.
Go through holy
We
heck.
fought that fight.
Yeah.
It's ugly. So yeah. So recovery. Let's talk a little bit about recovery. Any backup that you can mount in version 11, any kind of backup, you can restore virtually. So you have a physical machine, you've got an agent for Windows, which is a physical backup. You can restore that to VMware, Hyper-V. You can do that. So you got a critical physical machine that goes down. If you have a backup of it, you restore it virtually. And not only that, it can be done really quickly. They have what's called an instant recovery VM solution, and basically you point it at your virtual hardware, and you say, okay, restore it to here. It mounts the backup as a virtual machine, and it tracks all the changes that you make, so your data is available. I've spun up those instant recovery VMs in 5 minutes. I get the call, gee, our server died, something's wrong. Go to the backup. I do an instant recovery VM. They're back up in, under 10 minutes, and they're back up and working on the stuff. Now, it's not as fast as a full restore in terms of performance wise on the virtual machine, but it's workable. And then it's also tracking all the changes you make. So people are actually doing their work orders and doing their stuff and saving documents, and all those changes go into a separate file. And then you need to do the full restore. But when you do that, the downside of an instant recovery VM, I'm gonna just lay it all out for you. The downside is, at some point, it's gonna have to shut that instant recovery machine down, incorporate the changes you've made since you started it into the fully restored VM, and then power that up. And there's that gap of downtime while it's doing that. Shut the virtual down, add the changes, and fire it back up. And so far, the longest time we've ever done was probably 4 days before we did the full restore, and the downtime was like 20 minutes. And you can't really predict when that downtime is going to be. When you kick off the full restore, it just does its thing. And we guessed well, the downtime came on a Sunday night on the one I'm thinking of. So, nobody was really kicked off their stuff because nobody was on it on Sunday night. But you got to be prepared for that. But so you can have people back up and running, 5-10 minutes off of the backup. But then there's going to be some downtime when things finally get fully restored. The full restore obviously takes longer, but it's a fully functional virtual machine when you're done. And of course, nobody's able to work on it while it's being restored because it's just being restored. But once it's done, you're totally back up and running. And they do really well with SQL databases and Exchange databases and, all that stuff. It does all the right log truncation and all that stuff as part of the backup process. So that doesn't come back to haunt you when you're doing the restores either way. So full restores, they take, depending on the size of the machine, anywhere from an hour to, we had a 10 terabyte machine, took 3 days to restore, but it all works, and it's all been rock solid. And I'm just gonna touch a little bit on Veeam support. Their support is stellar. It's American based. You get people you can understand on the phone. They're happy to walk through stuff with you. They've changed their support model a little bit. We used to be able to just call in and get support. Now we got to go through the portal, set up an email. Part of that process is collecting logs, and but it enables them to get to the root of the problem a little quicker. So response times have gotten, I think, a little better on responses from Veeam after the initial contact with them. And they've kind of separated out into groups. They've got a cloud group, an agent, like a Office 365 group, agent for Windows group, backup and replication group. So you're kind of being slotted at that initial point in the process of putting a ticket in. But those people, they are well trained, and they really know their stuff. And I know Veeam pretty doggone well, but I've gotten into some spots where I don't have a clue, and I have to make the call, and they've always come through. We've had to set up some stuff where we didn't want a machine to be backing up using the regular Ethernet connection, for example. And so we added a NIC to the machine and set it up to back up only through the second NIC, only through its, and we, got a dedicated path to the data store where it was going. And so that thing backs up, and we get a little CPU usage a little bit, but other than that, the machine is rock solid. Never see any downtime on it. It's pretty
For a
simple.
home user, can you back up to like a portable drive?
You can. Any physical device on your network or just USB.
Okay.
Yep. As long as you're not backing up off-site, like to OneDrive or any other, AWS or something. As long as you're just backing up to a local device, it's free.
Okay.
So, and they, here's a really nice tool that they include in that agent for Windows, especially agent for Linux too, I'm sure, but I've really only used it in Windows. When you install the program, one of the first things it's going to do is say, hey, you got a USB stick you can throw in here, we can make bootable. And so it becomes like a bare metal restore boot CD with some tools on it. Mm-hmm. That you can use in conjunction with the backup files to restore your stuff. But one of the really nice things about it, say your kid forgets his password, he's got a laptop, forgets the password, or one of their friends plays a prank on him, changes their password, then the friend leaves and the kid needs to get to his homework. That boot CD's got a nice little administrator password reset. It enables the default administrator account on the computer, sets no password, and it's just like hit the button, click a couple of times, it's done, it reboots. Now you can log in as administrator, get back into the computer, change the password on the profile that's got issues, or if it's got a corrupted profile and you can't get in, this is another way in. And
is that something hard coded to that particular piece of equipment? Or can I take that to another machine and boot off of it?
I've been able to use it across different machines. I have one in my little toolkit, and I use it all the time. Now, for somebody like Ken in your line of work, that's a little scary little piece of software. But it has, you get that trust relationship is gone on the domain.
Eye in the sky. Judd's opinions and experiences don't necessarily reflect those of NetVPro. Use case scenarios are taken upon by the users themselves, not necessarily NetVPro in practice, commercially or privately.
But if you're on the domain and your domain profile gets corrupt, for example, you can grab this thing, reset that administrator password, get in. Now you're a local admin and can rejoin the domain and get that taken care of.
I think the answer to that question is we can neither confirm nor deny that capability.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know if Microsoft still makes it, but they used to make something like that back in the, let's say, the NT40 days.
Right.
Where you had the ability to fire up this CD and go change the password.
Right.
Now, you do need physical access to the box, but it is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. With this, again, you need physical access to the box. But yeah, it's there. And there are ways around, other ways to get password changes and stuff when you don't have access to the machine.
Not to belabor the subject, but
yeah.
Suppose your drive is encrypted. You pop that CD in or that USB.
No,
okay.
It doesn't work. I ran into that a couple of weeks ago, actually.
So that'd be a big problem.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, there's no way to get into that. Believe me, I tried.
And that really wouldn't be a Veeam problem. That would be a Microsoft problem.
Right. Yeah. But BitLocker does its job. That's for sure.
Okay.
So that's a nice little hi, how are you for BitLocker. You should BitLocker your machines, because then they're almost impenetrable that way anyway. So, but in terms of ransomware, back to the regularly scheduled program, the biggest way in is email and links in email and downloadable stuff. And, that's almost 80% of what's going on and how people are getting ransomware into their computers. And of course, that's the big threat right now. And, and 20% malicious websites, and somebody drops their flash drive on the ground and you pick it up and shove it in your computer. And next thing you know, you're on the hook.
It's actually shocking how many people do that.
Man,
it's like a monkey with a stick sticking in the handle.
Well, you just put a label on it outside the building, executive compensation plans, XLS.
Right.
Who's not going to open that?
I think you can put a label on it that says, "Do not put this in your computer."
And they still do it.
And they still would.
They still would.
Well, I got a really old crappy laptop at home. The screen's busted. And I don't ever connect it to the network, and it's specifically for stuff like this. When you got to do some researching and find something, or somebody sends you a link, and is this legit? And if I can't get a hold of the person to find out if that was the person that
actually, Don, it's interesting. I do too. I call it my dirty machine. It's not connected to anything. I just call it my dirty machine.
Yep, and everybody should have one just for stuff like that.
My wife would argue that I have too many laptops anyways. She's not in favor of my dirty machine, but
well, sometimes you got to have it.
Sometimes
let's not construe that in some other fashion there, that machine.
Yeah, right.
My wife doesn't like my dirty machine.
Yeah, that's probably going to be a soundbite somewhere, I think.
Yeah. Somebody will turn it into a song and make $1 million off it. So with ransomware, which being the big threat, how it works is you get all these different attack vectors. You get the email, you get the website, you get the flash drive, you get somebody handing you something or sending you something. Your data gets encrypted. You basically have two choices. You either have to pay the ransom or restore from backups. And sadly, they're kind of even getting around the restore from backups piece to some degree these days, because if they capture your data, they still can hold it ransom to release.
Yeah, I call it the double extortion, because they
Yeah,
get you for the
you know.
decrypt, and they get you for the, we're gonna put your data out on the internet, and then you got to trust that they're good people who are gonna do what they say they're gonna do.
Yeah,
You
the
look like an
people that
honest
are
criminal, so
blackmailing
yeah,
you,
I'll
good
trust you.
people.
There's
Yeah.
actually a company out of, I can't remember if it's Iceland or Greenland, is actually producing de-encryption software. So you don't have to use the bad guy stuff. You just get the key and use their software to do the decryption.
Wow, that could be cool. Yeah, because you never know what else they're putting on there with it,
Exactly.
you know?
We learn more here by accident than other places by design. So I'm gonna make a note of that, Mr. Romer. Good tip.
That is good.
Wasn't it illegal to, well, the United States, to pay the ransom?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
A lot of companies, you know, if they don't have backups, what's their other option? You know,
I mean, no one's
and-
enforcing it, but technically you're correct.
Yeah. So, you know, here's what you, as far as ransomware goes, here's what you can do. Back up and restore. There's, you know, 3 copies, 2 formats, 1 air gap from the network, the 3-2, you know, the 3-2-1 rule. And, you know, make sure your equipment's all patched, everything's up to date. That helps, unless, yeah, that helps. Education is probably the one of the biggest things you can do to help stop stuff, because people are sheeple, man. They'll click on anything, and you know, you gotta
Even like
train them.
like with the education thing, like if I have an executive who finds an email that they're suspicious of and asks a question, I literally give them a gold star. People will, that little piece of positive reinforcement, or I give them the intergalactic security certificate. Like that. And it just, you know, makes them feel good about it. But that's kind of one of the ways that I reinforce them during the education thing, because it's surprising, you know, how like then they start to listen. You know, that little positive thing gives, you know, it's amazing what a CEO will do to get a gold star from their IT guy.
I just did a ransomware test for a client, basically phishing, and we got a 52% click rate.
Wow.
He was shocked. He was actually shocked.
Yeah,
That's shocking.
That is shocking.
Now, I just came up with an email that looked like it could be from the company. The email address was all wrong. And you just get a compelling message. We're making a change to your healthcare benefits. Sorry, not everybody's going to be happy. Follow the link below to find out what the changes are.
I had one the other day that came to me and said, your Google password is expiring. Please click this link and input your password. And it was like, wow. Yeah, no, number one, no. But I was like, wow, it was just that simple. And I'm sure people just kind of go, oh, all right. Blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know my mom would click on something like that. She wouldn't even give it a second thought
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy.
if she knew how to use a computer. But you know, that's a whole nother question.
Right.
So we actually do, there's a company we work with to do some education, and we've got a couple of customers signed up for that. And it really does help.
It does help. I mean,
It really
I see it. I see it in a couple of customers where after implementing that education process, we will get questions about, hey, is this legit? Is this, you know, I'll get that. I actually just got one yesterday. Hey, I got another fake email, you know, just people picking it up like that.
Right. And I get those all the time as tickets. People just forward me. I'm like, if you get something you're suspicious of, forward it to our ticketing system. Our guys will take a look at it and verify whether or not it's good or not. And sometimes if you can't really figure it out, it still looks suspicious, although everything kind of checks out. I'm like, call the person who sent it to you and ask them if they sent it to you. I mean, that's the easiest way to make sure that it's legit.
A little bit back at the ranch, I find that a lot of times people don't think of their backup solution or their disaster recovery plan as part of their protection against ransomware.
Right.
It's not contemplated in that way. It's not thought of in that way. You know, if they have an IT staff, a lot of times their IT people do. But if it's an entrepreneurial place and they don't have a full staff, they haven't thought of that necessarily. So Veeam is a great tool. You have it set up the right way to use it defensively.
Right. And a lot of that falls on us as IT professionals to make sure that
the other piece of it is that every once in a while you want to go in there and make sure you're backing up the right stuff. You know,
right.
make sure that it's usable, it's a viable thing when you need it. Because like I actually just did a presentation this morning, and it's like it doesn't matter till it matters. Then it really matters. You know,
Right.
It's like air, right? Nobody cares about air because they don't have any.
Right.
When I was running a department, we always did our backups, but we always did test restores every single week. You had to know whether you can get that stuff back, because people do this for years and then there's nothing there.
Right. Especially if it's just incrementals that get rolled up. You get one bad one, and now it's in the chain forever. And if you don't test it, you'll never find it.
Especially if you're working in an environment where you don't get to say, well, I guess it didn't work. Yeah. Sometimes you don't get a do-over. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We'll get her next time. This one was a learning experience.
This one's on me. This one's on me.
No.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you know, and controlling access is critical. I know we see a lot of customers that just say, well, you know, make that thing open to everyone.
Well, you start talking about zero trust architectures and that type of thing, controlling access, not just for people, but for devices on a network. You know, start thinking about a zero trust landscape.
Right. Make sure you have a guest network and it doesn't see inside to your production network. That's a good step, because who doesn't have a cell phone that connects up to the internet these days? You know,
I'm pretty sure no business network wants what's on my cell phone in their production space. So I've never seen one of those before.
Right.
Oh, I should have paused the recording for that one. Sorry.
We'll edit that out. We can do some post-production.
We can edit that out.
So
My dad's got tools. He can do it.
Yeah, right.
So, and again, don't pay the ransom. Beside it being illegal, it's just stupid. It just encourages the people who are doing that to keep doing it. If nobody paid the ransom, there'd be no market for it, and they wouldn't bother. And and improving your security posture is always a good thing. If anybody has questions about that, contact Keith, and he will get you set up with the right info. And the right.
I'm going to throw this out there to Ken. I mean, a lot of times improving your security posture doesn't necessarily need to be expensive. You know, it's just kind of having a conversation, ask the questions. There's a lot of free to low cost tools that will help you. And
simple thing right here is control access. I mean, not everybody needs access to the accounting files.
Well, control access and patch. Patch it's astounding to me how many places don't do patching.
Yeah.
You know,
you're kind of forced into patching nowadays.
What was that, Pat?
I said you're pretty much forced into patching nowadays.
No, almost compulsory, right?
Unless you're still running Windows 7, which is surprisingly out there a lot. So we just did an audit on all of our clients and came up with, I don't know, 100 and some machines that are still Windows 7 or below. And
we still have a Windows 7 machine, but I don't have it connected to the domain. It's all on its own. Yep. We have to have it for older version of QuickBooks, because we still have a lot of clients that come in with these old versions, and we got to figure out how to get them moved up to new versions.
Right. But if you're air gapped, the chances of getting anything coming your way is pretty slim, unless it comes in on the media with the QuickBooks files.
Right.
So, which you can scan before you plug in. So, yeah.
There's a company out there called Zero Patch, which is still making patches for Windows 7.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I didn't know that.
That's cool.
Free at the consumer level, but if you want the more sophisticated stuff, It's a nominal fee.
Wow. Keith, make a note of that for me, will you?
Yeah, zero patch.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Well, the last thing we got here is the 3-2-1 rule, which if you're, grandfather, father, son rule, say it was what we used to call it back in the day, but now they're calling it this 3-2-1 thing. Basically 3 copies of your data, 2 different media, 1 copy offsite. That's it's good sense to do it that way. Here it shows a tape device. It wouldn't have to be a tape device. Tapes are old and slow and not real reliable, but they do work. They still do work. I don't know what really more to say about that other than we have 3 data centers. And if you want to get your data offsite, that's a good way to do it. Our data centers are secure. I'm going to be going out this weekend to do some upgrades at one, and
they won't let me into them, so it's got to be good. They stopped me at the door.
Not you.
You again. Get out of here.
So yeah, it's Veeam. I gotta say, Veeam is good stuff. I used to use a different product at a prior employer, and Veeam is light years ahead of that other product, and they're probably, I don't know, number 3, number 4 in the field. I won't bother naming them, but I still see from time to time some of their stuff floating around, and Veeam they keep improving. They really do, and every new version comes out with some awesome new features. They've got a new feature that we didn't talk about here that does continuous backups. There's and doesn't use shadow copies, especially on virtual hardware or for virtual machines, which is really cool because shadow copies, when you're taking shadow copies and releasing them, it slows down your production substantially. And this new technology they're using doesn't require shadow copies. And so you can say, gee, you can choose, okay, I want to back up every 5 minutes. I want to back up when there's X amount of gigabytes of change data. I want to just throw back up at that, every time it exceeds that amount of change data. And I want to keep retention for however long. So that's a really cool feature. I've not personally seen it in real life yet. That requires the higher tier of licensing that Veeam has to use. But I'm hoping I can get my hands on it here pretty quick.
If you need it, if it's something you need in your environment, extremely handy.
Well, and if you got a lot of change data, it would be of value. It would seriously be of value.
Well, think about a call center app.
Yeah.
With e-commerce.
Yeah, e-commerce. You have a lot of change data.
Databases constantly buzzing through.
Yep.